This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elizabeth McAndrew. The Autobiography of Mother Jones by Mother Jones. Section 18, Victory in West Virginia. One morning when I was west, working for the Southern Pacific Machinists, I read in the paper that the Paint Creek Coal Company would not settle with their men and had driven them out into the mountains. I knew that Paint Creek country. I had helped the miners organize that district in 1904, and now the battle had to be fought all over again. I canceled all my speaking dates in California, tied up all my possessions in a black shawl — I like traveling light — and went immediately to West Virginia. I arrived in Charleston in the morning, went to a hotel, washed up and got my breakfast early in order to catch the one local train a day that goes into Paint Creek. The train wound in and out among the mountains, dotted here and there with the desolate little cabins of miners. From the brakeman and the conductor of the train, I picked up the story of the strike. It had started on the other side of the Kanawha Hills in a frightful district called Russia, Cabin Creek. Here the miners had been peons for years, kept in slavery by the guns of the coal company and by the system of paying in scrip, so that a miner never had any money should he wish to leave the district. He was cheated of his wages when his coal was weighed, cheated in the company store where he was forced to purchase his food, charged an exorbitant rent for his kennel in which he lived and bred, docked for school tax and burial tax and physician, and for protection, which meant the gunman who shot him back into the mines if he rebelled or so much as murmured against his outrageous exploitation. No one was allowed in the Cabin Creek district without explaining his reason for being there to the gunmen who patrolled the roads, all of which belonged to the coal company. The miners finally struck. It was a strike of desperation. The strike of Cabin Creek spread to Paint Creek, where the operators decided to throw their fate in with the operators of Cabin Creek. Immediately, all civil and constitutional rights were suspended. The miners were told to quit their houses and told at the point of a gun. They established a tent colony in Holly Grove and Mossy, but they were not safe here from the assaults of the gunmen, recruited in the big cities from the bums and criminals. To protect their women and children, who were being shot with poisoned bullets, whose houses were entered and roughhoused, the miners armed themselves, as did the early settlers against the attacks of the wild Indians. "Mother, it will be sure death for you to go into the creeks," the brakeman told me. "Not an organizer dares go in there now. They have machine guns on the highway, and those gunmen don't care whom they kill." The train stopped at Paint Creek Junction, and I got off. There were a lot of gunmen, armed to the teeth, lolling about. Everything was still, and no one would know of the bloody war that was raging in those silent hills, except for the sight of those guns and the strange, terrified look on everyone's face. I stood for a moment looking up at the everlasting hills, when suddenly a little boy ran screaming up to me, crying, "Oh, Mother Jones, Mother Jones, did you come to stay with us?" He was crying and rubbing his eyes with his dirty little fist. "Yes, my lad, I've come to stay," said I. A guard was listening. "You have," says he. "I have," says I. The little fellow threw his arms around my knees and held me tight. "Oh, mother, mother," said he. "They drove my papa away, and we don't know where he is, and they threw my mama and all the kids out of the house, and they beat my mama, and they beat me." He started to cry again, and I led him away up the creek. All the way he sobbed out his sorrows, sorrows no little child should ever know, told of brutalities no child should ever witness. "See, mother, I'm all sore where the gunman hit me," and he pulled down his cotton shirt and showed me his shoulders, which were black and blue. "The gunman did that?" "Yes, and my mama's worse than that." Suddenly he began screaming, "The gunman! The gunman! Mother, when I'm a man I'm going to kill 20 gunmen for hurting my mama. I'm going to kill them dead, all dead." I went up to the miners' camp in Holly Grove, where all through the winter, through snow and ice and blizzard, men and women and little children had shuddered in canvas tents that America might be a better country to live in. I listened to their stories. I talked to Mrs. Sevilla, whose unborn child had been kicked dead by gunmen while her husband was out looking for work. I talked with widows whose husbands had been shot by the gunmen, with children whose frightened faces talked more effectively than their baby tongues. I learned how the scabs had been recruited in the cities, locked in boxcars, and delivered to the mines like so much pork. "I think the strike is lost, Mother," said an old miner whose son had been killed. "Lost? Not until your souls are lost," said I. I traveled up and down the creek, holding meetings, rousing the tired spirits of the miners. I got 3,000 armed miners to march over the hills secretly to Charleston, where we read a declaration of war to Governor Glasscock, who, scared as a rabbit, met us on the steps of the State House. We gave him just 24 hours to get rid of the gunman, promising him that hell would break loose if he didn't. He did. He sent the state militia in, who at least were responsible to society and not to the operators alone. One night in July, a young man, Frank Keeney, came to me. "Mother," he said, "I have been up to Charleston, trying to get someone to go up to Cabin Creek, and I can't get anyone to go. The national officers say they don't want to get killed. Boswell told me you were over here in the Paint Creek, and that perhaps you might come over into the Cabin Creek district." "I'll come up," said I. "I've been thinking of invading that place for some time." I knew all about Cabin Creek, old Russia. Labor organizer after organizer had been beaten into insensibility, thrown into the creek, tossed into some desolate ravine. The creek ran with the blood of brave men, of workers who had tried to escape their bondage. "Where can we hold our meetings?" I asked. "I don't know, Mother. The company owns every bit of dust for 20 square miles about, and the guards arrest you for trespassing." "Is there an incorporated village anywhere near?" "Exdale," said he, "is free. Bill a meeting for me there Tuesday night. Get the railway men to circulate the bills." Monday night, a fellow by the name of Ben Morris, a national board member, came to me and said, "Mother, I understand you are going up to Cabin Creek tomorrow. Do you think that is wise?" "It's not wise," said I, "but necessary." "Well, if you go, I'll go," said he. "No, I think it is better for me to go alone. You represent the national office. I don't. I'm not responsible to anyone. If anything happens and you are there, the operators might sue the union for damages. I go as a private citizen. All they can do to me is to put me in jail. I'm used to that." He left me and went directly to the governor and told him to send a company of the militia up to Cabin Creek, as I was going up there. Then he got the sheriff to give him a bodyguard, and he sneaked up behind me. At any rate, I did not see him or the militia on the train, nor did I see them when I got off. In Exdale, a sympathetic merchant let me stay in his house until the meeting began. When I got off the train, 2 or 3 miners met me. "Mother," they said, "did you know there is a detective along with you? He's behind you now, the fellow with the red necktie." I looked around. I went up to him. "Isn't your name Corcoran?" said I. "Why, yes," said he, surprised. "Aren't you the Corcoran who followed me up New River in the strike of 1902? You were working for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad and the Coal Company then." "Why, yes," said he, "but you know, people change." "Not sewer rats," said I. "A sewer rat never changes." That night we held a meeting. When I got up to speak, I saw the militia that the national organizer had had the governor send. The board member was there. He had made arrangements with the local chairman to introduce him. He began speaking to the men about being good and patient and trusting to the justice of their cause. I rose. "Stop that silly trash," said I. I motioned him to a chair. The men hollered, "Sit down! Sit down!" He sat. Then I spoke. "You men have come over the mountains," said I, 12, 16 miles. Your clothes are thin. Your shoes are out at the toes. Your wives and little ones are cold and hungry. You have been robbed and enslaved for years. And now Billy Sunday comes to you and tells you to be good and patient and trust to justice. What silly trash to tell to men whose goodness and patience has cried out to a deaf world. I could see the tears in the eyes of those poor fellows. They looked up into my face as much to say, "My God, Mother, have you brought us a ray of hope?" Someone screamed, "Organize us, Mother." Then they all began shouting, "Organize us! Organize us! March over to that dark church on the corner, and I will give you the obligation," said I. The men started marching. In the dark, the spies could not identify them. "You can't organize those men," said the board member, "because you haven't the ritual." "The ritual, hell," said I. "I'll make one up." "They have to pay $15 for a charter," said he. "I will get them their charter," said I. "Why, these poor wretches haven't 15 cents for a sandwich. All you care about is your salary, regardless of the destiny of these men." On the steps of the darkened church, I organized those men. They raised their hand and took the obligation to the union. "Go home from this meeting," said I. "Say nothing about being a union man. Put on your overalls in the morning, take your dinner buckets, and go to work in the mines, and get the other men out." They went to work. Every man who had attended the meeting was discharged. That caused the strike, a long, bitter, cruel strike. Bullpens came, flags came, the militia came, more hungry, more cold, more starving, more ragged than Washington's army that fought against tyranny were the miners of the Kanawha Mountains, and just as grim, just as heroic, men died in those hills that others might be free. One day, a group of men came down to Exdale from Red Warrior Camp to ask me to come up there and speak to them. 36 men came down in their shirt sleeves. They brought a mule and a buggy for me to drive in, with a little miner's lad for a driver. I was to drive in the creek bed, as that was the only public road, and I could be arrested for trespass if I took any other. The men took the shorter and easier way along the C&O tracks, which paralleled the creek a little way above it. Suddenly, as we were bumping along, I heard a wild scream. I looked up at the tracks along which the miners were walking. I saw the men running, screaming as they went. I heard the whistle of bullets. I jumped out of the buggy and started to run up to the track. One of the boys screamed, "God, God, Mother, don't come! They'll kill!" "Stand still," I called. "Stand where you are. I'm coming." When I climbed up onto the tracks, I saw the boys huddled together, and around a little bend of the tracks, a machine gun and a group of gunmen. "Oh, Mother, don't come," they cried. "Let them kill us, not you." "I'm coming, and no one is going to get killed," said I. I walked up to the gunman and put my hand over the muzzle of the gun. Then I just looked at those gunmen, very quiet, and said nothing. I nodded my head for the miners to pass. "Take your hands off that gun, you hellcat," yelled a fellow called Mayfield, crouching like a tiger to spring at me. I kept my hand on the muzzle of the gun. "Sir," said I, "my class goes into the mines. They bring out the metal that makes this gun. This is my gun. My class melts the minerals in furnaces and roll the steel. They dig the coal that feeds furnaces. My class is not fighting you, not you. They are fighting with bare fists and empty stomachs the men who rob them and deprive their children of childhood. It is the hard-earned pay of the working class that your pay comes from. They aren't fighting you." Several of the gunmen dropped their eyes, but one fellow, this Mayfield, said, "I don't care a damn. I'm going to kill every one of them, and you too." I looked him full in the face. "Young man," said I want to tell you that if you shoot one bullet out of this gun at those men, if you touch one of my white hairs, that creek will run with blood, and yours will be the first to crimson it. I do not want to hear the screams of these men, nor to see the tears, nor feel the heartache of wives and little children. These boys have no guns.